Welcome to our studio visit with Australian artist Beverly Allen. I'm Sally Petru, ASBA's immediate past president and a board member for the Northern California chapter of Botanical Artists, who are hosting this exhibition at the Marin Art and Garden Center this year, the 24th Annual International. Two of Beverly's paintings are included in the exhibition, and we thought that this presented us a unique opportunity to visit with her in her studio in Australia. And the image that you saw in our opening slide was her award-winning red flowering gum, which received the Richmond and Lily Bates Award. In addition to the 24th Annual International Exhibition, our chapter has installed the second exhibition of new work for the Mount Tamalpais Florilegium. This Florilegium showcases the unique beauty of rare and protected as well as common species growing on Mount Tamalpais here in Northern California. Thank you all for joining us for what promises to be a fascinating hour with Beverly, to see her garden and some of the work that she's done over the years and some work in progress on the easel. I'd like to introduce Sarah Rye, our assistant to the executive director. She'll be overseeing questions and answers, and ASBA's Director of Exhibitions, Carol Wooden, who will tell you just a little more about the show and will introduce Beverly.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. The 24th Annual International at Marin Art and Garden Center this year is installed right now, and we're very happy to have it there. It's a juried exhibition of an international field of artists, and this year there was a record number of entries for this exhibition. We had 260 entries, from which 45 artworks were chosen. Artists hail from the US, Australia, Canada, France, Japan, Russia, Singapore, South Korea, and the UK. In addition to this studio visit with Beverly Allen, we're also hosting one with Asuka Hashiki later in November. And then we'll have two virtual techniques workshops in November as well, one with Lucy Martin and one with Akiko Inokido. So at the end of the program, I'll put up a slide sharing links for more information for all those events. And you can also find a link for the exhibition catalog if you'd like to purchase one on our website. We'd like to thank the staff and volunteers at Marin Art and Garden Center and the Northern California Society of Botanical Artists for the many, many ways in which they are all contributing to making this exhibition such a success in California. If you have any questions, type them into the Q&A. There are a few questions we may ask during Beverly's presentation, but most of them will hold to the end, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So on to Beverly's introduction. I'm so thrilled to have Beverly here. Beverly's artwork has always been among the world's most distinctive. Whether capturing some of the large-scale flora of her home country of Australia or making intimate paintings on vellum of collections of seeds, fruits, flowers, and the like, Beverly's work stands out for its grace, power, and impeccable sense of color, draftsmanship, and design. She started working as a graphic designer and illustrator before moving to botanical art in 1997. She has shown annually at the Royal Botanic Garden Sydney Botanica exhibition since 1999, and her work has been exhibited around the world. Her watercolor paintings that have been shown in ASBA's exhibition are always substantive and memorable, from the Wallamy pine that was in Losing Paradise to the Taka integrifolia that was in Weird, Wild, and Wonderful, and her dramatic painting of coconut palm that was in Green Currency received the New York Botanical Gardens gold medal. The Shirley Sherwood collection holds 6 of Beverly's works, and her Strelitzia painting graces the cover of her most recent book, the Shirley Sherwood Collection, Modern Masterpieces of Botanical Art. Her work is also held at the Hunt Institute here in the US, in the UK at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew Library, and at RHS's Lindley Library. She holds a gold medal from the RHS for her watercolors of epiphyllums and related species. She co-founded and is president of the Royal Botanic Gardens Sydney Florilegium, which includes upwards of 130 contemporary paintings, and 2 books have been published about the Florilegium. The Florilegium Royal Botanic Garden, Sydney, celebrating 200 years in 2016, and Botanic Endeavor. The Florilegium celebrates the Banks and Solander collections in 2020. She received ASBA's 2016 ASBA Diane Bouchier Artist Award. Beverly is an honorary member of the Chelsea Physic Garden Florilegium Society and the Botanical Art Society of Australia. She is patron of the Hampton Court Palace Florilegium Society. Her work is represented by the Jonathan Cooper Gallery in London. So take it away, Beverly.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I was quite taken aback. And thank you, Sally and Carol, for suggesting this visit. And I'm delighted to welcome everyone to my home and studio here in Sydney. Firstly, I thought I'd show you a little of the garden as if you'd really come to visit, seeing we can't do that these days. I already filmed it to save on wobbly images and unforeseen weather. Then a few of the paintings I live with and the back garden, and then upstairs here to the studio. And as Carol said, I'll show a range of some of the images and talk about how they came about. And then I've got a couple of large works in progress in the studio. So we'll have a look at them, and I'm very happy to answer questions afterwards. So firstly, we'll move to perhaps the slide. So here we go. Now I need to share the screen. Is that?
So welcome to my home, my little house in Hunters Hill in Sydney.
Sorry.
This is my little...
I can't seem to get share screen. Sorry.
Can you wand over the Zoom window with your cursor, and share screen should come up.
Right. But what I haven't got is, oh yes, sorry.
No worries.
Is that
There
coming?
we go. Yes.
You got it? Okay, good. And start.
So welcome to my home, my little house in Hunters Hill in Sydney. This is my little front garden. Lots of clivia out at the moment. And blue gingers. The sun's just coming out again. So a mix of all sorts of things, whatever will grow in fairly heavy shade, as I have a big jacaranda overhead. This is a geranium madarense, which is in a pot. It's doing its once only wonderful flowering. It's all just one plant. It looks fabulous, doesn't it? Colours divine, lovely grey shadows. So we go in to the front door and some changing paintings down the hall. Little gallery of some of my work. Some I'll show you later. Well, this is my living room and a few things I have on the wall. This is the an etching. This is from the Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. It's very old, over 200 years old, mostly held together with Japanese mulberry paper. It's a Henry Joseph rejeté of a date palm, and I bought it a long time ago when I first started painting. I just thought the composition was so dramatic and I love it. This is something I'm very happy to have. This is a print, a signed print by Pandora Sellers, whose work I absolutely adore. And I have to say, was a
Okay, I'm sorry about the abrupt stop there. My camera ran out of something or other, puff. Now I have the second little one, to the back garden. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I so find my screen again. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't find the other screen. Sorry, Carol. Oh, there it is. Just move it a little. Here we go.
Great.
Okay, and I need share screen to come up, don't I? I'm sorry about this bumbling, everybody. We have practiced, and now why doesn't share screen come up? Whoops.
You just have to wand over the thing to activate it. Take your cursor over the,
Okay, yeah.
and here we have.
Is it working?
And
it's
here we
not
have
sharing, but you found it.
at the back garden.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Don't worry, Beverly. Just go back to your share screen and find that one again.
Just doesn't come up. Oh.
If you can't find
No.
it, you can go right ahead to the slideshow.
Yes, I think I will. I'm sorry, because it's when I click on it, it's going on QuickTime Player, but not the Zoom giving me the. Oh, sorry. Now I've got it. There we go.
Ah, here we go.
And here we have a little look at the back garden. It's quite a tiny little courtyard, but a few pretty things in it. Lots of clivia in flower at the moment, being spring. Another cantria in the pot, waiting for it to move up. And then my green wall of Thunbergia mycerensis and a very old Hoya. One of the epiphyllums, I haven't painted this one. The Taca integrifolia and the Worsley procera, both of which I've painted. And this is my little COVID herb and salad greens plot, all in pots, of course. I have a row of citrus trees, and the mess on the ground is citrus blossom, limes, I think a lemon, but it seems to have become a lime. I keep forgetting the name of this plant. I'll mention it later. So I've hung the epiphyllums in the citrus trees, because there's quite a lot of them now, all just coming into bud for their flowering in October through January. This little path up to where I have my car and the back street. This is my little nod to Italian gardens. And behind it, a Melianthus major, which is obviously coming into flower as well. So that's it, my little plot.
Okay. So am I back again?
Yes, you're back. And then
Right.
there you go.
Okay, working.
Hold
I'm
on.
just,
There
am
we
I
go.
there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I thought about my philosophy and practice for this visit, I realized I have several areas of interest in painting by choice and by fate. They form really three strands of direction, and these overlap and entwine a little like my garden.
Beverly,
Yes.
can you get this on full screen? It was on full screen before. I think there's a setting here somewhere to get it on full screen.
Of me.
No, the full screen view of your slideshow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I'd speak. I'll put the slide up then. Okay.
No, the slideshow is up, but it is not on full screen.
Okay. How about that?
There we go.
Okay. Well, I just thought I'd speak first a moment. Yes. So these three strands are really specific exhibits, like the RB Royal Botanic Gardens Sydney Annual Botanica, the ASBA exhibitions and flora and invitational exhibitions. The second is Flora Ledger, which I've been quite involved with. And the main one, I guess, or the third one, are personal interests or indulgences. These are the sort of irresistible encounters, the plants that move me or seduce me visually. And this suggests the artistic is more dominant than the science, I think. The drive to create something beautiful is really my motivating force. The curiosity to explore deeply into a subject, to reveal the relationships and the incredible design within the structure, and the harmonies that unfold in close painting and bring them to light and share them, really. This is probably consistent with, in a way, my former life as a graphic designer. That background also influenced my resistance to constraining my work to one direction or choice of plant subject. Years of working to a brief and always to a time constraint means that over the last 24 years, where botanical painting has overtaken my life, I've had my small personal rebellion to paint what moves me and to take as long as necessary to do it as well as I possibly can. Now, I'd like to show you some of these three strands in the slideshow in relation to the paintings. So it's not in a chronological order, but a reflection on these, on the paintings, the influences, and some of the backstories that go with it. We'll begin with the personal interests, these seductions, or how can you resist them pieces. The Strelitzia Nicolai, one of my first works in the Shirley Sherwood, and quite wonderfully, as Carol mentioned, on the cover of the recent book. I found this on a morning dog walk down near a bay nearby, and hastened home with the poor dog to go and ask the people whose land it was on if I could have it. It's just so statuesque. It's one of those things you can't not paint when you see it. The Bulbophyllum was one of several works from encounters in the Sydney Botanic Gardens, and it was drawn and some of the painting done in situ because obviously it's huge. I couldn't move it. I was given a couple of the little flowers and I went home and made a little plasticine, one of them, so I could change the shape and get the lighting on the different flowers up the top. The Worsley Procera, I've painted this twice. First in the tropical centre in the steamy month of February, sitting there with Jenny Phillips, desperately working away and answering tourist questions about what on earth we were doing there. And the second one, I had a call from a client who said, I think I have something that you might like to paint. And of course I did, because it was a spectacularly flowering and symmetrical form of this plant, which, you know, I grow now, very slow growing. It's flowered once in about 7 years, but we always hold hope, don't we? This is a white hippeastrum, which was a gift from my sister-in-law, and it's flowered every September since 2005. This year I have 3 stems of flowers, so I might finish the one I started last year, which will be, I think, my 3rd painting of this. It's quite a beautiful one. The Dorianthus excelsa. This is a very large lily in Sydney. It's native to the coastline here. It's quite dramatic. Again, they're in flower at the moment, and the flower stalk is between 2 and 4 meters tall. They're a huge flower, about 18 inches across. This is a close-up of the same flower. Now, I like to portray the personality or the habit of the plant, the posture of it that leads you to it in the first place. Quite often, you know, it's wall appeal, as some people might say. This was the American lotus that was growing in the very large old pond in the Botanic Gardens in Sydney, and I sat there drawing it, because the wonderful thing about the lotus is you have everything happening at once. You have buds, flowers, seed pods, green, which turn brown very quickly. So I constructed a small version of the work first, a little study in the gardens. I enlarged it, started drawing it up and painting it. I went back there and they pulled them all out to repair the wall. So I had to go and find it, and find a very large tub, 1 meter deep, and grow it in the garden and finish it off the next year. This happens, as many of you would know. The Bambusa vulgaris striata is also in the Sydney Botanic Gardens. It's a huge stand, about 30 feet high. It's like standing in front of an old ship. It creaks and groans in the wind. So again, I grew some of this too, so I could keep the leaves fresh. The Tacca integrifolia was painted for the ASBA Weird, Wild and Wonderful, as Carol mentioned. I painted it life size for this. It has the most wonderful leaves, as you saw in that little wobbly video. And recently, as I've watched it flower every year, it flowers quite prolifically, 5 or 6 stems of flowers each year now. I painted one of the unfurling buds, because they're quite fabulous. They're closed up, and then they start to burst open with those wonderful, wonderful long hairs, whose name I've forgotten. And I'd been intending to paint this for years, and I finally did. I thought it was so weird, but it was actually very popular and was people's choice at the gardens. It's very large. It's up about 7 times, so it's about 1 meter and a bit wide, the whole painting, all of which you're seeing here. This was another happy encounter. This was a tulip I had in London. We'd bought a pot of tulips a couple of years ago, very formal, what do you call them? Well, very formal, bowl-shaped, goblet-shaped tulip, and had it in the window, went away for a couple of days to look at some gardens, and when we came back, they'd all turned, as the English say, gone over. But to me, it was this fabulous turning point, with the petals curving around themselves, just absolutely beautiful to my eyes. And I drew it then and did some colour things, but I had to work from photographs. So again, I painted this very large. The whole painting's about 1 meter, bit over 1 meter high, but there was so much to explore in those colours and in that movement that it had to be enlarged. And I also paint very small. This little thistle I found in Transylvania when I was there on the hillside. Some of these little vellums are really just my own personal mementos from travel. This little stemless thistle, Carlina corlus, is actually very symbolic around the Mediterranean, and people pin it up over the door to keep the devil out of the house. So hopefully it'll keep working for me, though I haven't put the painting over the door. The little cedar, this is the cedar of Lebanon. A couple of little seeds. These came from Malmaison in Paris, Josephine and Napoleon's house just outside Paris, which is now open. A beautiful museum with, there was a wonderful Ready-Day exhibition on when I was there. At lunchtime, the house closes, and there's actually nowhere to eat there without walking quite some distance. So I sat under the cedar and had orange Fanta and those little Madeleine biscuits that I bought from the vending machine in the bathroom. So these scales were all over the grounds, and they were quite exquisite. And this tree was planted in 1801 by Napoleon and Josephine when they were setting up this house and wonderful garden that she had. So often after a large work of paper, big work on paper, I work on vellum. I think it's a form of control and restraint, and you'll finish it fairly quickly, and you don't have all those long periods in the middle that you have in the middle of a big painting where you just have to keep going, and you'll eventually get there. Composition is important in all the works I do, and I take considerable time on composition. I guess that's the design background to the fore. The play of textures, colours, shapes, the relationships, the movements and tension created are what I love in these collection works. You play around with the little pieces to set up your little still life. Obviously, they're still life. They're all botanically accurate, but they're very much still life pieces. I love the work of Jan van Kessel and the Dutch 17th century works, and also the English artist Elliot Hodgkin, who painted in little still lifes and tempera. So I've painted a lot of these. This is a little Australian collection. All sorts of bits of Australian seeds and dried flowers and such like. These are some little whimsical roadside pieces, plants I found on the roadside in the Southern Highlands, just south of Sydney, with hippeastrum seeds thrown in for good measure because they're fun and curious to paint. This is up in the wine growing country at Mudgee. They're wild oats, thistles and purple top Silybum marianum, all by the roadside, all picked on the roadside out in the country. But fun to put together, utterly whimsical. This one's a little Italian-Australian thing, a weird combination. Honeysuckle, Lonicera italica, and the seeds of the big Dorianthes I showed you earlier. Also from the street I used to live in, black olives and purpley blue hydrangea. Nice together, lovely line. I love line and movement. This is a little COVID piece last year when we couldn't leave our houses except for emergency. There were little pieces in my front garden. The Gloriosa Rothschildiana lily seed pods, the red ones, and a little rose and an acer leaf. In any size work I do, line and rhythm are a really important factor. I'm always looking for a good a lyrical line or a good movement. And, you know, if I find something like that, I'm hooked. This was actually a commission last year for a 50th birthday for a present for an orchid lover. And we had several plants we looked at. I was utterly delighted when this was chosen because it was quite exquisite. Those leaves are just marvelous, the way they're moving around. It's an Anacalium, though the name's under dispute. Also have a love of the light, the form, shade. Quinces I've painted probably half a dozen times. I just adore them. Pomegranates on vellum, this one. Little medlars, a branch of medlars that came recently. This is a work on paper. This was also last year. And a row of quinces, also last year's quince crop. Now, the second strand of my work are specific exhibitions. One of the first major ones, apart from Botanica each year, was for the RHS. I chose epiphyllums. I love curious plants and the uncommon ones. And I was given an epiphyllum, a very old one. And I thought at first, well, I'll paint species epiphyllums. They're so unusual. They have these rather ugly cladodes. And then once a year, they do a spectacular flowering, and then they go back to being straggly, disjointed creatures again for the rest of the year. Then I found that the species ones were pretty much white night flowering, which presented a bit of a problem. I also found they were pretty promiscuous plants and hybridized readily. So I thought, well, I'll do them from colonial gardens because many of them were imported here in the early 1800s, quite surprisingly. So I did quite a few. They weren't all colonial in the end, and because they hybridized readily, some I couldn't name. So, as I said, some of them are quite ugly in a way, but fun. This is a mistletoe a few years ago for the Botanica exhibition, which was called Symbiosis. I was struggling to find something different. And I found this on a friend's property in Berry, out in the countryside, south of Sydney. Fortunately, it had so many lichens on it. I think there's 7 or 8 various lichens and mosses on it. It's again quite large, another about 1 metre wide. And by wonderful symbiosis, it was on a branch of mistletoe. So it was quite wonderful. And recently, this, which is a little microcosm of a rainforest, again was found. Actually, the orchid collector had found it up in northern New South Wales. So I borrowed it for a while. It had quite a few orchids on it. Wonderful detail. These are just little close-ups. So much to explore in this sort of thing. The Journey of Plants was an exhibition curated by Anita Walsmith-Sachs in the Netherlands recently, and there were 7 artists, each from a different country, invited to exhibit plants that had travelled a long way, that had travelled from another country and were now naturalised and almost naturalised and common in our own gardens. So there were 10 paintings and 3 of them had to make a journey. This was an agapanthus from my garden, which originally, of course, came from South Africa. This is the Rosa chinensis mutabilis from China, again, from my garden, from a cutting of a wonderful big old tree that a friend had, which I took cuttings of when she left the house, and fortunately it flowered because the next owner removed the shrub. And a Strelitzia regina, also from South Africa, and another epiphyllum because they came from South America. This is a firewheel tree. This is a native to Sydney and the east coast of Australia, and this is a common street tree now. And this magnolia, which is in the exhibition, of course, made the journey from the US in about 1726 to the UK and France a couple of years later, and then to Sydney around the 1800s. And it's very common now in gardens, big gardens, and in the street. Wonderful shade tree. And this was also, this is a street tree. This is the corymbia, the red flowering gum that you have seen. The coconuts, the ASBA exhibitions, I have exhibited quite a number of times in. This was the coconuts in green currency. They came from northern Queensland, actually, where my son was living, fortunately accessible without going too far up a palm tree. Where are we going? The Wallamai pine. Again, this was done with the help of the Sydney Botanic Gardens and Mount Tomah Gardens, their sister garden. They gave me several branches, which are still hanging in the studio, well dried. And the dinner plate fig, which was in Out of the Woods for the ASBA recently, which again, it comes from the Sydney Gardens. It's one of my absolute favourite trees. I need to move on. And finally, Florilegia, the third strand that I have become so involved with. Highgrove I contributed to, wonderful book. This was an Australian tree fern that I painted for Highgrove. I felt I had to do something Australian for the Southern Hemisphere garden there. Spent a long time looking at this out of my kitchen window in the previous home, wondering how on earth I was going to put such a great big plant into a rather small piece of paper. However, we got there. And this was Transylvania, which I was invited to do, my painting of the burning bush, Dictamus albus. That was a wonderful experience, going there and trudging around the meadows, staying away from the bears in the woods. Another little orchid from the Transylvania paintings has 3 colours, comes in 3 colours, so they're all there. The Florilegium that we've done for the Sydney Gardens, the Botanica exhibition, the annual exhibition and major fundraiser by the Friends of the Gardens, was a focus for 20 years. And it was an opportunity to give back to the gardens by founding the Florilegium Society in 2005 with Botanica's first curator, my friend Margot Child, and a committee of artists and supporters. Carol did mention we produced 2 books, one for the 2016 bicentenary of the garden. These are a couple of my paintings in the collection. The blue ginger, again. The ones growing in my garden are actually all from this sample that I was given. It's quite a prolific grower. And the Barringtonia, which is a New Caledonia plant, the Barringtonia neocaledonica. It's a fabulous plant. Often on the tree, you'll get both the red leaves and the green leaves at the same time. And they're sort of new, doesn't happen all the time. And you get the flowers as well. You don't get the fruits. So this has 3 branches, which is showing the whole life cycle of the plant. And Botanic Endeavour, which has, where I've got a fly. This is our recent book. Our exhibition has yet again been postponed due to COVID. So we're hoping to have it next May, which will be 2 years later. And this finally is as the flannel flowers, again, a Sydney native. There, I probably should have done an enlarged version for you. It was a very complex painting, as you can see. There are several stems of the plant. That's how they grow. They're very prolific out in the sunshine over rocks and rocky areas. It's all fuzz. It's velvety, the leaves are velvety, the stems are hairy. By the end of this painting, I was desperately wishing I could paint a hard edge. So that's the end of the slides. Are we back? I stopped the share, is that correct? And we're back, okay, we're back in the studio. I know a florilegium generally refers to a collection of paintings of plants from a particular garden, but that little show was my painted garden, my collection of plants that have come my way over the years and become my garden, inside and out. Now we'll move over, if all is okay. I'll pick this up and move around the studio so you can see a little of it. And then we'll go to the easel and show a couple of paintings. So up we get. This is going to be tricky. So the studio, moving around it, just some, sorry, it's hard to see what's happening. Just sideways, some quinces. I'm trying oil painting, hasn't got very far. Endless seed collections and so on. As you can see, you see? Bits and pieces of cards and such like. I think we all have these, those quinces. Now, this is a recent painting. I don't think, this is not the painting. This is actually the specimen. That's better, isn't it? I was going to paint the this new Strelitzia Nicolai that I'm painting, that I'll show you shortly, and I went looking for them in a very old cemetery near us, and I found this dead one. So that was a wonderful winter painting. I'll show you the painting in a moment. Now, again, lots of collections of seeds. So can you see the Wallamai pine? Still intact. And here, this is another Dorianthus. Can you see this? I take this down, sorry. I know that's noisy. Need two hands. This is a current paint. This has been going for 2 years. They're just coming into flower again. It's fabulous. It's a huge inflorescence, much like its sister plant, the Dorianthus excelsa. So I'm quite enjoying this. I've been doing a bit each year, and I'll hopefully finish it off this year. It's very large. The plant is about 1 metre high. Everything's 1 metre high, I think. I don't know whether you can see this. It's very rough. I did a very rough drawing on tracing paper first. My first bit was a little plan numbering each space, so I could find my way up it. So a fairly rough drawing with a couple of details, and then I transferred that to, I'm going to wiggle for a moment, sorry. I transferred that to the painting paper, and sorry, it's hard to do things one-handed. I just want to cover this up because you won't be able to see the next thing I show you if I don't. Sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right. Okay, so that's about the extent of the studio. Around here. Now, this is my, this is what I'm currently working on. First of all, I'll show this to you. Hopefully, can you see this? This is the Strelitzia Nicolai I'm working on at the moment. So I've tied it up. Can we see this? Oh. Sorry, I don't think you can. Gosh, this is stupid. There we are. It's tied up from the ceiling on cords and such like. So it's in its natural position and then it's sitting in a vase of water. So let's put you down here. Now this is how I approach the work. This is the, not the same Strelitzia, I'll show you that in a moment. This was the dead one, the dying one. First of all, I draw a tracing on tracing paper. I don't draw the whole thing, but I draw all the structure of it, everything that's important. This is very dark because I've then put 2H graphite on 2B graphite on the back and rub down the pieces as I need it on my paper, and then I draw from the plant straight onto my paper. But I don't want to, you know, do the first sketching that you can do to get things happening. So we move from that. This is the painting. There's so much detail in it. It's coming along. It's not finished yet. There's a fair few serious darks to get happening. But this was so much fun to paint. I know it's dead and brown, but gosh, inside it there's yellows and mauves and pale blues and soft greys and deep burnt siennas. It's been quite fabulous to paint. I've loved doing it. Colours, my colour works, I was pushing for time, I'm sorry. So colour, you know, I work from the 6-colour palette, but that expands for different pigments. So I try and keep my pigments quite clear and pure, but always working within that colour wheel. So down and sorry, we had a bit of a collapse there. So starting with this new Strelitzia, I did some rough sketches first, just finding my way, feeling my way around the composition to see how it's working and getting in. This one didn't feel right. It looked right, but then it didn't feel right when I was doing it. So I had another one where I really, again, I moved it a bit. So that's a pretty rough, but you know, it gets you in, you start feeling the plant, you're finding your way around it. You're looking and observing and learning about it. And then we get into a drawing. I can put that over the painting so you can see it. So again, a drawing which I then put graphite on the back and rub down with a little burnisher. So I can rub down the parts as I go, as I want to draw them. So I'm not putting graphite all over and I'm not erasing on the actual painting paper. So after transferring, we end up with a fairly fine drawing. Everything's drawn in, and I've just got in some of the very fine, the pieces that are going off quickly, you know, the flowers as they're coming out. So I'm just, again, putting those in, the pieces that change dramatically. I think we'll move back over here, except I've dropped things all over the floor. Sorry. Oh. Okay. So that's about it for the moment. I think we're running out of time. So have we any, you happy to go to questions?
That was a real workout, Beverly. We're so grateful that you brought us into your studio and your home and shared some of your work with us. I'd be interested in having you talk a little bit about your technique relating to, it looked like in that last Strelitzia you showed us that you maybe do some washes in your underpainting, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, certainly. Yes, I do. If it just depends a bit on, you know, obviously what the subject is, and how quickly it's going over. So yes, if I can, I get washes on. I use, I prime first and then put washes on as much as I can. I build up as much color in washes as possible, and then down to dry brush work and you know, finer work. So you go through a lot of stages, you know, from the washes, when that's as far as we can go. Then it's what I call just painting, where you're working semi-dry brush, little bits of dry brush, whatever it takes to get, you know, to get it moving along. So all those techniques, all those watercolor techniques, a lot of dry brushing at the end for detail, you know, with magnifying glasses on and to do it. But yes, and layering colors as much as I can. Often I layer, in fact, frequently I layer colors, particularly with leaves. I find layering yellows, lemons underneath, cadmium lemon, shock horror, cadmium yellow middle, and layering them underneath the greens. So if I can, I layer, and yeah. But I work with the color wheel all the time, but even if I use different pigments, like I use a lot of different pinks and reds, probably 5 or 6 different ones, the quinacridone red, permanent rose, on some of these, the naphthalene maroon on the big one. So, yeah. Is that sort of answered that, or?
Yeah, that's good. And I'll let Sarah ask questions.
Yes, I have a question. What were the biggest challenges that you faced when you were illustrating for the Transylvania Florilegium?
Right, that was fun. That was nerve-wracking, you know, because we had 2 weeks and we had to do 3 paintings, not complete the painting there, but obviously I can't bring plant material back into Australia because of our laws. But we tramped around the meadows, and there were 8 of us on that expedition. And everybody was, the plants were all unfamiliar to me because they were European plants, they were meadow plants, they were way out of my comfort zone. So we'd wander around the meadows, and some of the other artists saying, oh, I'll do that. And I was getting desperate because I had nothing after a day, and I had 1 week in one village and 1 week in the second village. Anyway, I did find it, but yeah, the challenges, we worked in our rooms, and I worked in an old barn for a while because the light was better. And you're really just desperately getting as much done as you can while you're there. Then fortunately I went back to London, and I could work on my paintings there for a week or 2. So it was fortunate we had John Akeroyd, the botanist, with us. So he was around us all the time and able to answer questions. So that was fun. But gosh, there was a lot of pressure to, to produce it without before we left. But it was an extraordinary experience, I have to say, to be sitting painting and watching the cows walk down the dirt road outside the window with their bells on as they all went up to the meadow for the day, and the chooks and all the rest of it was wonderful.
Do we have time for one more?
Yes.
Carol? Oh, okay, great. Going back to your lovely garden, Beverly, did you plant your own plants, and are those plants all native in your front and back garden?
No, I've been here for 10 years now, and the house the front part of the house is about 110 years old, or thereabouts, 120. The garden wasn't very much. There's a big jacaranda in the front garden, which takes up all the energy out of the soil, out of that little triangular plot. There were some camellias, japonicas, and a row of citrus trees, which I kept. But most of it I've planted. Some are natives, some are not. The garden doesn't get a lot of sun. There's one patch at the back that gets sun. In summer, it gets blazing hot sun. So things need to be tough there. In the front garden, as I said, it's overshadowed. So it's really what will grow stays there and survives. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I just can't part with plants. After I get a cutting to paint, it has to go in the garden. I have trouble even pruning things and not keeping cuttings and propagating. So it's looking good at the moment, I have to say. It's so nice. I think that's part of, the COVID lockdown. At least I'm enjoying my garden instead of skipping off somewhere like.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how many of the plants you have in your garden that we've seen in our exhibitions, I've seen in other exhibitions. I have to say that there were two really interesting things. I mean, you said a lot of interesting things, but one thing I want to follow up on is when you talked about building a plasticine model.
Yes.
The bulbophyllum. Do you do that often? And can you describe to people exactly what that is and why you do it?
Oh, look, I fortunately haven't had to do it too often, but that one, because it was in the tropical center and it's very big. I mean, those leaves are about 3 feet long, and the flower head is it's big, a bit bigger than your hand. And there were about 25 flowers on that, and they're all coming out in different directions. So I was given 2 of the flowers that had fallen off, and plasticine, I don't know what you call it there. It's like a child's modeling clay. So I made up in white, modeled a little flower, because they're like a little beak. So I modeled a little flower, and then because I liked my work, from the top left with a single light, I could then light it and see how the shadows fell on it as you turned it round, because they were, front on, they were sideways, they were up, and they were down. So it enabled me to get an idea of how the light fell on the form. So really making a tonal drawing, because although now I draw pretty much directly onto the paper as much as I can, when I first started, the first 5 or 6 years, I always did a full tonal drawing of anything I painted, and I think that helped me an awful lot with looking at form and understanding light and shade, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, that is something that I don't know a lot of botanical artists do, and I do know some other kinds of artists do. So that was really an interesting aspect of your work. And I'll just ask one more question, unless you've got one, Sarah.
It's really about the composition of the bamboo.
Oh, yes.
painting. How did you set about reducing such a vast, plant and deciding how many, bamboo
Yeah,
stalks? Yeah.
that's interesting you mentioned that. I have downstairs a little study of that painting because I actually painted a whole study of it because when, as I said, it was huge. There were so many stalks, but when you're standing in front of it, I mean, it's an ornamental plant, and you sort of panned across like this, you got a long view of it, and these wonderful way those stems of bamboo were moving, and the leaves weaving through them with a different pattern, but a beautiful rhythm. You had two rhythms happening. Which were wonderfully complementary with the colors and the line. And also I was influenced that I kept thinking of the Japanese screens, the long, wonderful screens that they have, several panels. And I thought that might be a good approach to use. It sort of emphasized the Oriental aspect of it. So again, I chose the branches. Some were actually like that, but obviously a massive edit went on of all the ones behind. So yeah, there was a lot of consideration went into that composition because I really wanted that feeling of the rhythm of them, and then the other rhythm, the counter rhythm of the leaves moving across. So yeah, it was a pretty exciting one to do.
It certainly looked like that. Yes,
Oh,
yes, that's why I was glad that question came up, because I really wanted to ask about that one.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that hanging at New York Botanical Garden. It's about 5 feet long, just so everyone knows. And I don't know how you managed a sheet of paper that big.
Oh, that's because, as you saw, I put everything on foam core, this
Right.
foam core. So the big paintings have a paper corner just folded, so they're secured to the foam core, because that way I can turn them around, because you want to paint a clean line, you need to turn the work around. Not easy to turn big things around, and I think that's why I paint in the middle of the room, because on that very old easel, it's just a little swinging easel, but that way I can move around for the light, because I have this big light window on both. Well, I've got one on both sides, but the north side one gives me most of my light. I can move it round that way, but I can also push the two trolley chests aside that all my bits are on, and I can swing the painting round and turn it, and they don't get crumpled. It's easy to handle. So the big one, yes, that was on a big sheet of 10mm foam core, and I just push it along the easel as I was painting. It went this way, and then you moved it back again and turned it over. So yeah, makes it practical.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Beverly. Your day is just beginning.
Yes.
Now you can relax, and
Thank you, Carol.
so happy that you've all joined us. I promised to share some links for the exhibition, and I'll get those up here for a few minutes while people sign off. So take a look at our website here and Marin Gardens website here to learn about what other programming that we're going to be doing with the show. For the catalog of the exhibition, you can go to ASBA's website here. And then, of course, our virtual conference is coming up. Registration is open through October 6th. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, you can take a look at that too. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming.